In the 1960s, American car makers produced some of the most iconic vehicles ever, but not every design was a success. Some models were remembered less for their performance and more for their odd looks, strange ideas, or disappointing quality. During this decade, automakers experimented with futuristic styling, extreme tail fins, and unusual body shapes, often trying to outdo one another in flashiness. While some innovations became classics, others turned into jokes. Cars with oversized chrome, awkward proportions, or poor reliability quickly earned bad reputations.
Click like and subscribe.
Number 6.
The Ford Edsel is remembered today as one of the most famous failures in the history of the American automobile industry. Its story is not only about a car that did not sell well, but also about a company that misread the market, misunderstood customer desires, and fell victim to a mix of bad timing, poor execution, and exaggerated expectations. The Edsel is often used as a case study in business schools, marketing courses, and automotive history classes because it illustrates how even a strong company can make serious mistakes when strategy, design, and timing are not aligned. The project began in the mid-1950s, a period when the American automobile industry was experiencing incredible growth. After World War II, car ownership in the United States had exploded, and the big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, dominated the market. Each company tried to fill every possible price and prestige segment so that a buyer could start with an entry-level car and then remain loyal to the brand as they grew more successful in life. At General Motors, for example, a young professional might begin with a Chevrolet, move up to a Pontiac or Oldsmobile, later buy a Buick, and eventually aspire to own a Cadillac. This ladder of progression was highly successful. Ford Motor Company had a similar structure with its Ford division at the bottom, Mercury in the middle, and Lincoln at the top. However, Ford's executives felt there was a missing step between Ford and Mercury, a price category that GM had covered more effectively with brands like Oldsmobile and Pontiac. The Edsel was supposed to fill that gap and attract customers who wanted something more stylish and prestigious than a Ford, but who could not yet afford a Mercury or Lincoln. Planning for the Edsel was ambitious. Ford invested hundreds of millions of dollars into its development, an enormous sum for the 1950s. The company believed it was creating a brand new division that would stand alongside Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln. Market research, which was less sophisticated at the time than it is today, suggested there was a large untapped demand in the so-called medium-priced field. Executives were convinced that baby boom families moving to the suburbs would desire a car that symbolized their growing prosperity. The project was highly secretive, and even within Ford, many employees knew little about the car until just before its launch. Publicity campaigns built up excitement, promising something revolutionary that would change the automobile forever. When the Edsel finally debuted in 1957 as a 1958 model year car, the reaction was not what Ford had hoped for. The car was heavily advertised with a massive unveiling event known as E-Day on September 4th, 1957. Dealers across the country staged celebrations, and Ford invested heavily in marketing, including a television special. Customers expected a vehicle that was dramatically different, futuristic, and groundbreaking. Instead, what they saw was a car that looked somewhat odd, carried strange design details, and did not deliver on the promise of being revolutionary. The most talked about feature was a vertical grille in the center of the front end. Instead of the traditional wide horizontal grille seen on most cars of the era, the Edsel had a narrow oval that quickly earned unflattering nicknames. Critics said it resembled a horse collar, or even worse comparisons, and the design became a target of ridicule. While the rest of the car's body was similar to other large American cars of the late 1950s, this unusual grille dominated the look and turned away many potential buyers. Beyond the styling, the Edsel suffered from practical issues. The car was released during an economic downturn in 1957 and 1958, a time when American buyers were becoming more cautious. Fuel-efficient and compact cars were starting to gain attention, especially with growing competition from imported models like Volkswagen. The Edsel, however, was a large and expensive vehicle. Instead of being positioned in the middle price range as intended, its cost often overlapped with Mercury models, creating confusion about where it fit in the Ford hierarchy. Buyers wondered why they should spend money on an unproven new brand when they could choose a Mercury, Pontiac, or Oldsmobile with more established reputations. Another problem was quality control. Because Ford rushed production and distributed the Edsel across multiple assembly plants that were also building other models, consistency was lacking. Early Edsels often had mechanical problems, poor fit and finish, and reliability issues. Customers who bought the car felt disappointed when it failed to meet expectations, and word of mouth spread quickly. Instead of being known as a status symbol, the Edsel became associated with breakdowns and buyer regret. The marketing campaign also backfired. Ford had hyped the Edsel as the car of the future, but in reality it was built on the same platforms as existing Ford and Mercury models. Its engines, transmissions, and many mechanical parts were shared with other Ford products, making it far less unique than promised. The one notable innovation was the push-button gear selector in the center of the steering wheel, but even that system was criticized for being complicated and unreliable. In an era where drivers wanted simplicity and ease, the Edsel seemed unnecessarily fussy. Sales were disastrous from the start. Ford had hoped to sell around 200,000 Edsels per year, but in the first year fewer than half that number were purchased. The following years were even worse. By 1960, just 3 model years after its launch, Ford decided to pull the plug and end the Edsel brand altogether. The total production across all years was only about 118,000 cars, far below expectations. The financial loss was staggering, estimated at around $250 million, which would equal several billion in today's money. The failure of the Edsel had many consequences. Within Ford, it caused major leadership changes and a reevaluation of how the company approached new products. It demonstrated the dangers of relying too heavily on market research without understanding real consumer desires.
Number 5.
The AMC Rambler Marlin is one of the most distinctive and intriguing American cars of the 1960s. Produced by American Motors Corporation between 1965 and 1967, the Marlin was an ambitious attempt to create a personal luxury fastback coupe that would stand apart from the crowded marketplace. While AMC was known primarily for practical, economical cars, the Marlin was designed to change perceptions of the company and to bring style and flair to its lineup. With its sweeping fastback roofline, generous proportions, an unusual blend of sporty cues and family car practicality, the Marlin became one of the most unusual experiments of its time. Though it never achieved major sales success, its story reveals much about AMC's ambitions, the challenges of competing with Detroit's Big Three, and the risks of trying to combine bold design with mainstream appeal. Today, the Rambler Marlin stands out as one of the most memorable cars AMC ever built, celebrated for its uniqueness even as is often remembered as a commercial misstep. To understand the Marlin, it is necessary to place it in the context of AMC's situation in the early 1960s. American Motors was the product of the 1954 merger of Nash and Hudson, two smaller automakers struggling to survive against the dominance of General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Under the leadership of George Romney, AMC found its niche by producing compact, affordable, and sensible cars that appealed to practical buyers. The Rambler American and Rambler Classic offered efficiency and economy at a time when larger cars were the norm, and AMC enjoyed a degree of success by marketing itself as the sensible alternative to the excesses of Detroit. However, by the early 1960s, consumer tastes were shifting. Younger buyers were looking for more stylish cars, and the rise of sporty models like the Ford Mustang showed that flair and excitement could sell just as well as practicality. Romney left AMC in 1962 to enter politics, and his successor, Roy Abernathy, wanted to expand the company's reach beyond small cars and sensible image. The Marlin was conceived as part of this shift, a car that would make AMC appear modern, stylish, and capable of competing in new segments. The roots of the Marlin lay in a concept car called the Rambler Tarpon, which debuted in 1964. The Tarpon was a compact fastback coupe based on the Rambler American platform, and it generated considerable interest for its sleek styling.
With its low roofline and sporty proportions, the Tarpon seemed like an ideal rival for the Mustang and other emerging pony cars. However, AMC executives decided that a compact fastback might be too limited in its appeal. Instead, they chose to develop a larger car based on the mid-size Rambler Classic, reasoning that a roomier and more comfortable fastback would attract a wider audience, particularly older buyers who wanted style but also needed practicality. Thus, the Marlin was born. Introduced for the 1965 model year, the Rambler Marlin was unlike anything else on the road. Its most striking feature was its roofline, a sweeping fastback that extended from the top of the windshield all the way to the rear bumper in a smooth, continuous curve. This design gave the car an aerodynamic, almost futuristic look, though it also produced unusual proportions that divided opinion. Unlike the Mustang, which was compact and sporty, the Marlin was a full-sized car with seating for 5 and a spacious interior. Its long hood, wide stance, and distinctive roof made it stand out in traffic, and AMC promoted it heavily as a personal luxury car that combined flair with practicality. The name Marlin was chosen to evoke the sleekness of the fish, reinforcing the car's emphasis on style and speed. The Marlin offered a wide range of options to suit different buyers. Customers could choose 6 cylinders or V8s, with power outputs ranging from modest to fairly strong, though the car was never positioned as an all-out performance machine. Transmission choices included manual and automatic, and trim levels allowed for a degree of customization. Inside, the Marlin was comfortable and well-equipped, with bucket seats, quality upholstery, and optional features like air conditioning. AMC's marketing emphasized the idea that the Marlin was not just a flashy coupe, but also a practical car for everyday use, with enough room to serve as a family vehicle. This dual identity, part sporty fastback, part accessible Rambler, was the car's greatest strength and its greatest weakness. Public reaction to the Marlin was mixed. On the one hand, it was praised for being daring and different. AMC, a company associated with conservative designs, had produced something striking enough to turn heads. The fastback styling gave the Marlin a presence that was hard to ignore, and it attracted buyers who wanted something unique. On the other hand, the car's proportions drew criticism. Because it was built on the mid-size classic platform, the Marlin was larger and bulkier than most fastbacks, and some observers felt that the sweeping roofline looked awkward on such a wide body. Compared to the sleek, compact Mustang or the elegant Dodge Charger, the Marlin seemed heavyset, and its styling was often described as polarizing. For a company hoping to break into the sporty market, this was a problem. Sales reflected this ambivalence. In its debut year in 1965, AMC sold about 10,000 Marlins, which was respectable, but not impressive compared to the Mustang's runaway success. The next year, the Marlin was moved to the larger AMC Ambassador platform in an attempt to make it more of a true personal luxury car. This change gave the Marlin even more interior space and a slightly more refined character, but it also made the car larger and less sporty, further distancing it from the youthful image that had made cars like the Mustang and Barracuda popular. Sales dropped to fewer than 5,000 units in 1966 and declined further in 1967, the final year of production. In total, only around 17,000 Marlins were built over 3 years, far short of AMC's hopes. Despite its commercial struggles, the Marlins played an important role in AMC's evolution. It demonstrated that the company was willing to take risks and explore new markets, even if success was not guaranteed. The Marlins also paved the way for later AMC models that blended style with practicality, such as the Javelin and AMX, which more directly targeted the pony car segment. In some ways, the Marlin can be seen as a transitional model, a bridge between AMC's sensible Rambler image and its later efforts to appeal to performance-oriented buyers. In retrospect, the Marlin's failure can be attributed to several factors. First, its timing was unfortunate. The Mustang had already set the standard for sporty coupes, and buyers expected cars in that segment to be compact and nimble. The Marlin, by contrast, was larger and less agile, which made it harder to compete directly. Second, its styling was divisive. While bold, the fastback roofline did not integrate smoothly with the body, leading to criticism that the design looked awkward. Finally, AMC's marketing struggled to define the Marlin clearly.
Number 4. The Dodge Dart Seneca is one of those cars that tends to be overlooked in the grand sweep of American automotive history, but it represents an important part of the early 1960s when Dodge, like all American automakers, was trying to balance affordability, style, and market competition. Introduced as the entry-level trim of the Dart lineup in 1960, the Seneca was aimed at buyers who wanted a practical, no-frills car that still offered the size, power, and presence of a full-size Dodge. Although it never gained the fame of muscle cars or luxury models of the same era, the Seneca demonstrates how automakers positioned their product lines to reach every segment of the buying public, from budget-conscious families to status-seeking executives. In its short production life, it reflected both the strengths and weaknesses of Detroit's strategy during a time of shifting consumer expectations. The Dodge Dart itself was a new nameplate, introduced in 1960 to replace the Dodge Coronet as the company restructured its lineup. At the time, Dodge was struggling with its place in the Chrysler Corporation hierarchy. Plymouth filled the low-price market, DeSoto and Chrysler occupied the mid and upper ranges, and Dodge was meant to compete in the space between. But as the 1950s ended, Dodge's sales had declined, and Chrysler wanted to re-establish the brand with a stronger presence in the low to middle price categories. The Dart was the answer. A car designed to compete directly with popular models like the Chevrolet Biscayne and the Ford Fairlane, while offering a range of trim levels to appeal to different buyers. At the bottom of that range was the Seneca, followed by the mid-level Pioneer and the upscale Phoenix. The idea was that Dodge could capture buyers at every price point without losing them to rival brands. The Seneca was therefore deliberately simple. Its role was to be affordable, functional, and dependable, the kind of car that a working family or a fleet operator might buy in quantity. Styling for the 1960 Dart lineup followed the Chrysler Corporation's trend of dramatic fins and futuristic touches, though the Seneca's design was plainer than its siblings. The car had clean lines, modest chrome, and an overall straightforward appearance. Inside, it was equally Spartan, with basic materials, simple instrumentation, and limited trim. Options were available, but the Seneca's mission was to keep costs down, so luxury features were rare. Still, buyers could enjoy the solid engineering and spaciousness of a full-sized car without paying for unnecessary frills. Under the hood, the Seneca offered a wide variety of engines, ranging from a basic inline six-cylinder to a selection of V8s, depending on the buyer's needs and budget. This flexibility was a hallmark of Detroit automaking at the time. Even the entry-level model could be fitted with impressive power if the customer wanted it. Most Senecas were equipped with smaller, more economical engines, but fleet buyers, police departments, and performance-minded customers sometimes ordered V8 versions that gave the car surprising capability. Transmission choices included manual gearboxes and Chrysler's push-button automatic, which added a touch of futuristic flair even to the lowest trim level. Sales in the first year were reasonably strong, with Dodge managing to position the Dart as a serious competitor in the low-priced full-size market. The Seneca, in particular, appealed to budget buyers, as it gave them the size and stature of a Dodge without the cost of the more decorated Pioneer or Phoenix. For 1961, the Dart lineup was redesigned, and the Seneca received updates that reflected Chrysler's controversial styling experiments of the period.
Number 3.
The Studebaker Wagoneer is one of those unusual cars that captured the imagination not because it sold in huge numbers or became a cultural icon, but because of its unique design and the bold attempt of a struggling company to stand out in an increasingly competitive market. Produced in the early 1960s, the Wagoneer was a station wagon with a sliding roof panel over the cargo area, which allowed it to carry tall items that would not normally fit in a wagon. This simple but clever idea gave the car a reputation for practicality and ingenuity, and it has remained one of the most distinctive vehicles in Studebaker's long and sometimes troubled history. While it was not enough to save the company from its eventual decline, the Wagoneer showed how creativity and innovation could emerge even in difficult circumstances. Studebaker, based in South Bend, Indiana, was one of the oldest names in American transportation. The company had begun as a wagon manufacturer in the 19th century before transitioning to automobiles in the early 20th century. By the 1950s, however, Studebaker was facing mounting difficulties. The Big Three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, dominated the market with their vast resources, nationwide dealer networks, and aggressive marketing. Smaller independent automakers like Studebaker, Hudson, Nash, and Packard struggled to keep up. Many of them merged or disappeared, but Studebaker tried to survive by offering cars with distinctive styling, clever engineering, and sometimes quirky features that set them apart from the mainstream. The Wagoneer was part of this strategy. In 1963, Studebaker introduced a new line of cars designed by the legendary industrial designer Brooks Stevens, who had been brought in to refresh the brand's image. Stevens was known for his ability to do more with less, creating attractive designs on a limited budget. One of his most original ideas was the Wagoneer, a station wagon based on the Studebaker Lark platform. At first glance, the Wagoneer looked like a conventional wagon, but it had one remarkable feature. The rear section of the roof could slide forward, opening up the cargo area to the sky. This allowed owners to load tall items like refrigerators, ladders, or furniture that would not normally fit in an ordinary wagon. It essentially combined the practicality of a pickup truck with the comfort and enclosed space of a family car. This innovation was heavily promoted in Studebaker's advertising. Commercials and print ads showed families carrying everything from washing machines to small boats in the back of their Wagoneers. The company pitched it as the solution for Americans who needed a versatile car for suburban living, DIY projects, or recreational activities. The sliding roof was easy to operate, and when closed, it sealed against the weather like a normal wagon. Studebaker even offered an optional third-row seat, which folded down when not in use, giving the Wagoneer additional flexibility as either a people hauler or a cargo carrier. The idea was clever, but like many innovative features, it came with challenges. One of the main problems was water leakage. Early Wagoneers often developed leaks around the sliding roof panel, which frustrated owners and hurt the car's reputation. Studebaker worked to improve the design, but the damage to consumer confidence was difficult to undo. At a time when the company could not afford mistakes, the Wagoneer's issues added to the impression that Studebaker products lacked the refinement and reliability of their larger competitors. Even so, the Wagoneer attracted attention and earned respect for its originality. Automotive journalists admired the ingenuity of the design, and some buyers found it genuinely useful. The car could be ordered with a range of engines, from modest 6-cylinders to powerful V8s, giving customers choices based on budget and performance needs. Styling was crisp and modern thanks to Brooks Stevens' influence, and the car carried itself with an understated charm. For buyers who wanted something different from the usual Ford Country Squire or Chevrolet Impala wagon, the Wagoneer offered an appealing alternative. Studebaker also experimented with variations of the Wagoneer concept. Some versions had fixed roofs without the sliding panel, offered to buyers who liked the styling but did not need the special feature. Others were built as ambulances or utility vehicles, showing how the design could be adapted for commercial purposes. There was even talk of licensing the sliding roof idea to other manufacturers, though little came of it. The basic concept, however, foreshadowed later vehicles such as SUVs and minivans, which emphasized versatility and the ability to carry both passengers and cargo in flexible ways. Unfortunately, the Wagoneer could not escape the larger problems facing Studebaker. By the mid-1960s, the company was in serious financial trouble. Sales had been declining for years, and despite efforts to modernize its lineup, Studebaker simply could not match the scale and resources of the Big Three. The South Bend factory closed in late 1963 and production was moved to Canada, but the writing was on the wall. The Wagoneer continued for several years in small numbers, but by the late 1960s, Studebaker itself had exited the automobile business altogether. The Wagoneer's reputation has grown over time, as enthusiasts and historians look back on it as an example of creative thinking in an era dominated by conformity. Surviving Wagoneers are rare today, and they attract attention at car shows precisely because of their unusual sliding roof. Collectors value them not only for their quirkiness, but also for what they represent. The final years of an independent American automaker fighting to stay alive through ingenuity. The car's uniqueness ensures that it remains a conversation piece, and its connection to Brooks Stevens gives it additional design pedigree. In retrospect, the Wagoneer demonstrates both the strengths and weaknesses of Studebaker. On the one hand, it showed imagination, innovation, and a willingness to take risks that larger companies often avoided. On the other hand, it also revealed the challenges of being a small automaker without the resources to perfect new ideas. If General Motors or Ford had introduced a similar sliding roof concept, they might have had the money and engineering support to eliminate the leakage problems quickly and market the car more aggressively. Studebaker, however, lacked that capacity, and so its clever idea was overshadowed by practical shortcomings. Today, automotive historians often include the Wagoneer in lists of the most interesting and inventive cars of the 1960s. It may not have been a commercial success.
Number 2.
Pontiac Tempest GTO, introduced in 1964, is often credited with starting the muscle car era in America, and its story remains one of the most celebrated chapters in automotive history. Before its arrival, high-performance cars were usually expensive, full-size models designed for an older clientele with deeper pockets. Pontiac's GTO broke that mold by taking a relatively modest intermediate car, the Tempest, and giving it a big, powerful V8 engine, along with sporty styling cues that appealed directly to younger drivers. The result was a sensation that not only redefined Pontiac's image, but also created a whole new category of car that dominated the 1960s. The GTO, short for Gran Turismo Omologato, borrowed its name from European racing machines, but it became an American icon in its own right, embodying speed, style, and rebellion. The origins of the GTO can be traced to Pontiac's performance renaissance under the leadership of men like John DeLorean, Bill Collins, and Russ Gee. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Pontiac had transformed itself from a staid brand into a company known for excitement and performance, thanks to its success in NASCAR and drag racing. By 1963, the brand's engineers were eager to push boundaries even further. At the time, General Motors had a corporate policy limiting engine size in intermediate cars to 330 cubic inches in order to discourage dangerous levels of performance in family cars. DeLorean and his team saw an opportunity to challenge that rule by slipping a 389 cubic inch V8 into the mid-sized Tempest as part of an option package. Because it was technically marketed as a package rather than a separate model, it skirted GM's restrictions. This bold move became the foundation of the GTO. When it was launched as part of the 1964 Tempest line, the GTO package included not only the big 389 V8, but also dual exhausts, a sportier suspension, special badging, and cosmetic touches that set it apart from ordinary Tempests. Buyers could choose between a 3-speed manual, a 4-speed manual, or an automatic transmission, and the car was available in coupe, hardtop, and convertible body styles. The combination of a relatively lightweight body and a big, torquey engine gave the GTO thrilling performance. It could run a quarter mile in the mid-14-second range, which was seriously fast for a car that cost far less than most high-performance machines of the day. With its aggressive looks and powerful performance, the GTO quickly captured the imagination of young drivers, and its sales far exceeded Pontiac's cautious projections. The success of the first GTO was extraordinary. Pontiac had expected to sell perhaps 5,000 units in 1964, but more than 30,000 were ordered, proving there was a massive untapped market for affordable performance cars. This success sent shockwaves through Detroit as other manufacturers scrambled to introduce their own versions of the formula, mid-sized cars with big engines and youthful styling. The GTO had effectively invented the muscle car segment, and Pontiac suddenly found itself at the center of one of the hottest trends in the industry. As the 1960s progressed, the GTO continued to evolve. In 1965, the car received a facelift with stacked headlights and a more aggressive grille,
further distinguishing it from the Tempest. Under the hood, buyers could choose from multiple versions of the 389, including one with tri-power carburetors, producing 360 horsepower. The combination of raw performance and bold styling made the 1965 GTO a legend, and sales jumped to more than 75,000 units, cementing its place as a cultural icon. The GTO had become more than just a car. It was a statement of youth, speed, and individuality at a time when American culture was undergoing profound social changes. The years 1966 and 1967 brought additional refinements. For 1966, the GTO became a standalone model rather than just an option package on the Tempest, reflecting its success and importance to Pontiac. The car grew slightly larger and more stylish, with a curvier body that is now considered one of the most beautiful muscle car designs of the era. Sales reached their peak that year at over 96,000 units, the highest in GTO history. The 1967 model offered further improvements, including a new 400 cubic inch V8 to replace the 389, as well as safety updates to meet new federal regulations. These years marked the height of the GTO's dominance, as it remained the benchmark against which other muscle cars were measured. But as the decade went on, the competition intensified. By the late 1960s, nearly every American manufacturer had their own muscle car, from the Chevrolet Chevelle SS and Ford Fairlane GT to the Plymouth Roadrunner and Dodge Charger. Each company tried to outdo the others in power, performance, and style, leading to an arms race of ever larger engines and more aggressive marketing. The GTO still held a special place as the pioneer, but it faced increasing challenges in staying ahead of rivals. Pontiac responded with more powerful engines, such as the 455 cubic inch V8 introduced in 1970, and with new styling features, like the Endura front bumper, which gave the 1968 to 1972 GTOs a modern, clean look. Culturally, the GTO became a symbol of the 1960s youth movement. It was affordable enough that young buyers could aspire to own one, yet powerful enough to deliver thrills on the street or at the drag strip. Songs celebrated it, movies featured it, and car magazines covered it extensively. For many young Americans, the GTO represented freedom, individuality, and rebellion against the conformity of their parents' generation. At a time when the United States was experiencing profound social changes, the GTO fit perfectly into the mood of excitement and defiance. However, the golden age of the GTO and the muscle car era in general was relatively short-lived. By the early 1970s, rising insurance rates for high-performance cars, growing concerns about safety and emissions, and the looming oil crisis began to undermine the market. The GTO, like its competitors, saw its sales decline as buyers shifted back toward practicality and fuel efficiency. By the mid-1970s, the once mighty GTO had lost much of its performance edge, becoming more of a trim package than a true muscle car. It was discontinued in 1974, briefly revived in the mid-1970s on the compact Ventura platform, and then disappeared again.
Number 1. The Chevrolet Corvair is one of the most unique and controversial cars in American automotive history. Introduced for the 1960 model year, it represented General Motors' attempt to create something radically different from the typical Detroit product of the time. At a moment when most American cars were large, heavy, and powered by front-mounted V8 engines, the Corvair was compact, lightweight, and equipped with an air-cooled, rear-mounted flat-six engine. This unconventional design was inspired in part by European cars such as the Volkswagen Beetle and Porsche 356, which had demonstrated the advantages of rear-mounted engines in compact vehicles. For General Motors, the Corvair was both a bold engineering experiment and a way to compete in the growing market for small cars. Over its decade-long production run, it went from being hailed as revolutionary to becoming a symbol of controversy after a famous consumer safety campaign criticized it. Today, the Corvair is remembered as a car that pushed boundaries, suffered from damaging publicity, and left a complicated but fascinating legacy. The late 1950s provided the background for the Corvair's development. As American families moved into the suburbs, the demand for inexpensive, fuel-efficient, and maneuverable cars increased.
Imports such as the Volkswagen Beetle were gaining traction, and Detroit could not ignore this trend. Chevrolet, the largest division of General Motors, needed a competitor that was not just a smaller version of a traditional American car, but something genuinely innovative. Engineers were given the freedom to experiment, and the result was the Corvair, unveiled in 1959 as a 1960 model. Its engineering was unlike anything GM had ever sold before. The rear-mounted aluminum six-cylinder engine was air-cooled, eliminating the need for a radiator and allowing for a lower hood line in the front. The layout provided excellent interior space relative to the car size since there was no bulky engine up front. The suspension and handling were designed to take advantage of the car's balance, and the body had clean, modern styling that stood out in an era of tail fins and excess chrome. When the Corvette first hit the market, it received praise for its originality. Automotive journalists admired GM's willingness to produce something so different from the usual formula. The car was offered in several body styles, including two-door and four-door sedans, a convertible, a coupe, and even station wagons. Later, Chevrolet expanded the line to include commercial vehicles such as the Corvair 95 vans and pickups, which shared the same rear engine platform. This versatility made the Corvair a family of vehicles rather than just a single model, showing GM's ambition to turn it into a broad-based success. Performance, however, was mixed. The Corvair's flat 6 engine produced modest power, which was enough for basic transportation, but did not excite performance-minded drivers. To address this, Chevrolet introduced sportier versions, most notably the turbocharged Monza Spider in 1962, one of the first production cars in the world to feature a turbocharger. This gave the Corvair a boost in reputation among enthusiasts, and sporty trims became popular with younger buyers. The Monza, with its bucket seats and stylish interior, attracted a following and helped Chevrolet market the Corvair as a fun alternative to both imports and more conservative domestic cars. For a time, it seemed like GM had a real winner on its hands. But problems began to emerge. One of the Corvair's greatest weaknesses was its swing axle rear suspension, which had been used in some European cars but was not well suited to American driving habits. If tire pressures were not carefully maintained, the car could become unstable in sharp turns, leading to a tendency for the rear wheels to tuck under and cause oversteer. Skilled drivers could handle this, but ordinary motorists found the car difficult to control in emergencies. While many cars of the era had handling quirks, the Corvair's unusual layout made it stand out, and as accidents accumulated, it developed a reputation for being unsafe. This reputation was dramatically amplified in 1965 with the publication of Ralph Nader's book, Unsafe at Any Speed. In the first chapter, Nader singled out the Corvair as an example of a car designed with corporate cost-cutting in mind, rather than consumer safety. He argued that GM had known about the handling issues and failed to correct them. The book was a sensation, capturing the public mood at a time when consumer rights and product safety were becoming major concerns in American society. Although later studies, including government research, concluded that the Corvair was no more dangerous than other cars of its time, the damage was done. The image of the Corvair as an unsafe car stuck in the public mind, and sales collapsed. Chevrolet had already redesigned the Corvair for 1965, giving it a sleek new body and a fully independent rear suspension that eliminated the handling problems. Many enthusiasts consider the 1965 to 1969 models to be the best Corvairs ever built, combining beautiful styling with improved engineering. But the shadow of Nader's book and the growing competition from Ford's Mustang, introduced in 1964, doomed the Corvair's chances. The Mustang created an entirely new pony car market segment that captured the imagination of young buyers, and Chevrolet shifted their attention toward the Camaro to compete directly. The Corvair, once GM's bold experiment, was now an afterthought. Production wound down, and the last Corvair rolled off the assembly line in 1969. In total, about 1.8 million Corvairs are built over the car's lifetime, a respectable number, but far less than what Chevrolet had hoped for. The model had gone from being an innovative answer to imports to being labeled a failure in the court of public opinion. Yet, its story is more complex than the label of failure suggests. The Corvair introduced several technical firsts for American automakers, including the widespread use of aluminum in engines, turbocharging in production cars, and independent suspension systems. It showed that GM engineers were capable of real innovation when given the freedom to experiment. Its ultimate demise was caused less by its engineering flaws and more by the combination of negative publicity, changing consumer preferences, and competition from newer and more fashionable cars. Today, the Corvair occupies a unique place in automotive history. Collectors and enthusiasts appreciate it for its distinctiveness, especially the later models that corrected their early suspension flaws. It stands out at car shows because it looks and feels different from other American cars of its time, with its rear engine and European-inspired proportions. Owners often point out that with proper maintenance, the Corvair is perfectly safe and enjoyable to drive, challenging the reputation that has followed it for decades. In fact, many enthusiasts feel that the Corvair was unfairly maligned and that it deserves recognition as one of GM's boldest and most interesting projects. The legacy of the Corvair goes beyond the car itself. Ralph Nader's campaign against it sparked a broader movement that led to significant reforms in automobile safety. The creation of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the introduction of mandatory safety features such as seatbelt and crash testing were partly the result of the debate surrounding the Corvair. In this way, the car indirectly changed the industry, even if not in the way GM had intended.